We have looked at the values that animate our modern learning environment. And one of the things that I would like to bring to your attention before we proceed is that so far we have done 2 series in terms of our modern learning environment. And you have not heard us talk about computers in the classroom. Because when teachers are asked about a modern learning environment, they are very quick to talk about computers. They think that a modern learning environment is computers. And this is one of the things that if you're going to make sense of a modern learning environment, you have to understand that it's a very, very extensive concept. I have made the argument before that it is possible to animate a modern learning environment without ICT. It is not ideal, but it is possible. What ICT does is that it gives you tools that makes it easier for you to animate those things that comprise a modern learning environment. If you're talking about cooperation, if you're talking about collaboration, if you're talking about critical thinking, if you're talking about discrimination of information, if you're talking about organizing information across different platforms, then ICT makes it easier. The reason you have found modern pedagogy in Midas is not because Midas is using modern pedagogy to market itself. It is because Midas has the understanding that modern pedagogy is the only way to go because the context that education is being offered in has changed globally, not just for Midas. Whoever is not doing modern pedagogy, what else are they doing, and how are they helping their students cope in a modern world? Modern pedagogy is not about what Midas wants to be. It's about what the world is. And therefore, Midas is aspiring to be where the world is. The reason why we educate, how we educate, the world for which we are educating for has changed. And therefore, we have no option but to adopt modern pedagogical systems and processes in order to meet the needs of that changed context. Are there fundamental shifts in the way modern world runs that demand we change the way present and future generations will learn? This is a question that goes far beyond Midas. If we can answer this question, then you will be able to put the modern pedagogical practices and systems that we are advocating for in a broader context. What is it about schooling as presently conceptualized that makes it difficult for geniuses to survive? The Google guys are school dropouts. Steve Jobs was a school dropout. Michael Dell, the guy who founded Dell Computers, is a school dropout. What is it about our school system? How is it constructed so that geniuses are unable to survive? The school system, as we understand it now, evolved in the late 1700s and early 1800s to support the Industrial Revolution. That is to produce factory workers and supervisors. This issue is contentious. There is no consensus on historians of education on this particular genesis of the current education system as we know it. But we can borrow that model even as a metaphor, that you are producing people for a factory. In a book called Lynchpin, Gordon says that a factory is any organization that has figured it out, a place where people go to do what they are told and earn a paycheck. So you may not think that what you're doing is factory work because you're in school. But if what you're doing is receiving instructions and implementing those instructions as per the methodology given, then you are a factory worker. By that definition of education, today's insurance firms, government departments, banks, universities, corporate firms, law offices, etc. are also factories. This has been the model, a place where there is a fixed plan and a method, and all you have to do is fit in and do as you have been instructed. Geniuses don't survive in this kind of an environment. The education system developed to produce factory workers has no use for critical thinking, problem solving, independent thinking, experimentation, individual difference, creativity, and innovation. Remember, there is a method. It has already been figured out. So what happens to a majority of us who go through a school system that is designed to teach you to be a factory worker? The majority of us fall into line, practice the drill, gather the papers, and walk out into the world of work in the hope of being productive and obedient employees. This kind of education has produced millions of white-collar job seekers and consumers, and not enough producers, not enough entrepreneurs, not enough critical thinkers, not enough innovators, not enough visionary leaders, not enough scientists, not enough scholars, not enough inventors, not enough anything that is a product of a system that expects critical thinking. And that is why geniuses have a problem surviving in it. I like to extend this problem a little bit further, because this education system might be a problem for everybody in the world. It might be the prototype. It might be the template that everybody else is using. But when this education system was imported to Africa, something else happened to it. This education, developed for the industrial age, was supplanted in Africa with an imperialist and racist twist to produce a class of loyalist, decultured Africans, factory workers who were royal, and later to replace European administrators in the factory model. I call this double jeopardy. Already, we have inherited an education system that is factory-based. When it was supplanted here, it was supplanted with a racist twist, where you are not only expected to be a factory worker, but you are expected to be subservient to the colonizer. And you are taught that you are inferior. And you are taught that there's something wrong with your color. And you're taught that there's something wrong with your language. And you're taught there's something wrong with your history. And therefore, the people who have brought you civilization are not only your redeemers, they are also your masters. Critical thought, creativity, self-discovery, and innovation were not only unnecessary, they would be counter-racist and therefore undesirable, and were consciously and systematically suppressed. And that is why most of the people who are freedom fighters were school dropouts. The people who could survive in school are you and I, who are obedient Africans, who do what they are told. And to make sure that they control you, to make sure that school becomes a place of control, they introduced bells, parades, and prefects. We used to go to school, primary school. In the morning, you come out for parade. You line up, and teachers come, talking funny things, okay, and describing you and your father and your whatever. That is what used to happen in parades in colonial schools. Because they needed to screen whose father is a rebel. They needed to know who didn't come to school, who has joined the Mau Mau. Even the word parade who is usually paraded. When you're parading somebody, where do you parade people? In prison. But they even went ahead to do something that for me stands out as the biggest perversion of leadership in post-colonial cultures. The prefecture system, I have said before, is modeled on the colonial home guard system. They established one of the most corrupt systems that ever existed for governance. The school imported it. Remember, they need to control the school also. So when the children come to school, they pick the royalist children, especially if your father is a chief or is a home guard. They tell you now you are closer to the teacher than the students. Now you are the eyes of administration on the students. So you are like a teacher. You're not a teacher. You are somewhere. Wanafunzi wako hapa, wewe uko hapa. You are a special. And the schools produced one of the most corrupt systems of governance. So that when you are worried about our political class and the way they are behaving and wondering where they learned that from, they learned that right from school. That leadership is about patronage, leadership is about corruption, and leadership is about who you know. And more so, leadership is not about the led, it is about the leaders. And that is why in Midas, there are no prefects. No one has a right to govern another one without that other's consent. If you want to be a dome captain, you come and tell us why you want to be a dome captain. And if we like it, we will elect you. If we don't like it, we will elect somebody else. If you want to be a school captain, you come and tell us why you want to be a school captain. You cannot be appointed school captain by the principal. Power comes from the people. It does not come from the principal. Some of these perversions of education are things that we need to deschool ourselves from. Look at the question of bells. In the 21st century, why would a school have a bell? I can understand why a school would have a bell in the colonial times. One, watches were not that common. But secondly, the colonial teachers did not believe that the native can regulate himself. 50 years after independence, when everybody has a watch, we are still using bells in school and expecting that that school will produce a self-regulated individual. The world no longer needs more unthinking factory workers. Those are functions that we can outsource to machines. What the world needs now are people who can take on challenges, demonstrate initiative, develop original insight, deal with uncertainty, and solve problems. We desperately need education systems that emphasize problem solving and leadership, that encourage creative thought, and that stimulate passion. This is very easy to say. In fact, now that there is a discussion about changing of the 844 system, this is what you are going to hear. They will tell you that they want to change 844 system in order to emphasize problem solving and leadership and encourage creative thought and stimulate passion. The people who changed the system said the same things. That they want to make the system more practical, they want to make the system more relevant, they want to make students more independent thinkers, they want to make students creative thinkers, they want to make students future leaders. Those are the things that have been defined in the 844 system. So how did we end up where we are today? Even if you change the system and retain the same processes, we will be having the same discussion 30 years down the line. That our education system does not emphasize problem solving, does not emphasize leadership, does not encourage passion, does not encourage creative thought, because something needs to happen for those things to be achieved in education. And that is what we are calling modern pedagogy. If we do not change the pedagogy, we will end up in the same place 30 years down the line. because it is not about content, it is about how that content is taught and why that content is taught. We cannot have such institutions unless we innovate. Very few schools are even having this discussion, much less being different. Midas Boys is founded on the need to respond to this changing world. I imagined a school where we are not only going to have these discussions about modern pedagogy, but we are going to institutionalize practices in modern pedagogy that will allow us to get the kind of product that we are looking for the 21st century, not factory workers. This is the most important reason to innovate, but it is not the most immediate. We have discussed about the past and how the models of the past have affected the output of education in the present. And we have said that those models need to change. But even if we are unable to deal with the past, we are looking at a future that is fundamentally different, and that makes it imperative for us to change the way we teach the next generation. What is the most important factor that will radically affect the 21st century world of work in which our current students will be working in? How will the world of work look like in the future? What skills and competencies will be required to thrive in the world of the future? And in what ways must schools innovate to meet these requirements? Where were you when the world changed? The world where people did what they were told, followed instructions, found a job, made a living, and that was that. That world is fading very fast. The factory, a place you found the type of low risk, high stability jobs that many crave for, have turned into dead-end traps of dissatisfaction and unfair risk. The truth of the matter is, the skills you have today will not be sufficient to do the same job tomorrow in a world that is changing. And therefore, permanent and pensionable will not make sense anymore. And therefore, you cannot teach your students a set of skills that will get them employed for a lifetime. It won't happen. Now, this is a hierarchy value as given in the linchpin, in terms of skill, in terms of what is required. If you are lifting, you might go up and start hunting. So these are old skills. Then you move on as the world moves on, okay? So that here, from hunting, you are in the factory world, where you grow, you produce, and you sell. And then where the world is going is connect and create. And this is where you are training your students to be. Now, as you travel up the hierarchy, the work gets easier, the pay gets better, and the number of people available to do the job gets smaller. So if you don't have a job, what's the problem? You are doing things at the bottom of the stairs. How then do you increase your value? How do you make sure that you are at the top of the hierarchy? Workplace automation is nudging human workers out of rote, repetitive tasks. Premium jobs will be those requiring creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, innovation, and continuous training. Computational world, massive increases in sensors and processing power, with the world becoming a programmable system. Data, information, and knowledge will be available to everyone. Meaning, I don't have to come to school to copy notes. I have the notes. There is new media ecology, new communication tools beyond the text. So as a student, I do not need you to come and give me information, and I don't even require the text to get the information that I require to get. Globally connected world. A few years ago, it used to be that you only know the fellows from your village, and if you have traveled, if you have an auntie who happens to be beyond the village, maybe you may know one or two people beyond the village. Now, increased global interconnectivity puts diversity and adaptability at the center of organizational operations. Novel and adaptive thinking, proficiency at thinking about and coming up with solutions and responses beyond those that are rote or rule-based, also referred to as situational adaptability, the ability to respond to unique unexpected circumstances at the moment. Design thinking, this is the ability to represent and develop tasks and work processes for desired outcomes. New media literacy, communication tools that break away from the static slide approach of programs such as PowerPoint will become commonplace. When teachers come here, they actually think that using PowerPoint in the classroom is using ICT. PowerPoint is a static slide approach. There is actually no difference between PowerPoint and your notes. It's only that PowerPoint is projected. So just photocopy your notes and give them to your students. What we are looking for is critical ability to assess and develop content that uses new media forms. If the only thing your students know by the time they come out of MIDAS is a PowerPoint presentation, they are not ready for the future world. Ability to leverage this media for persuasive communication. Cognitive load management. This is, I told you, how do you manage information in an environment where there is too much information? As opposed to when you have a textbook and you are the only one who has a textbook, or the students have the textbook, and that is the only information that is available to them. If your students leave school without the ability to manage information, then you have not given your students the skill to survive in a modern world. When it comes to the question of collaboration, we are still at the basics of it. We are still dealing with collaborating between you and you. The future world is not collaborating between you and you, it is collaborating between you and a guy in China and another guy in Brazil. And therefore, when the only collaboration your students are doing is the collaboration of the guy seated next to them, if that's the only collaboration they have done, they are going to leave school without the skills they need to survive in a modern world. Because the modern world expects them to work productively, drive engagement, and demonstrate presence as a member of a virtual team, not a physical team. And we are having problems collaborating inside the classroom and you are seated together. How are they going to collaborate in this kind of a world? If you are collaborating with people across cultures, you need to have cross-cultural competence, because organizations will increasingly see diversity as a driver of innovation. Cross-cultural competency will become an important skill for all workers, not just those who have to operate in diverse geographical environments. Can your students collaborate across cultures? Or do the students just know how to be Kenyans? Social intelligence. This has always been a key skill for workers who need to collaborate and build relationships of trust, but it is even more important as we are called on to collaborate with larger groups of people in different settings. New products and organizational structures, social technologies drive new forms of production and value creation and organization. So what are the skills and competences that will be critical for success in that future world? Number one, transdisciplinarity. Literacy in and ability to understand concepts across multiple disciplines. A passion for constant self-renewal and reinvention. Individuals will have to embrace lifelong learning and permanent exploration of new knowledge and opportunities. The illiterates of the 21st century are not those who cannot read or write. It is those who cannot learn and relearn. Multiple portfolio will replace defined career paths. One will not be wanting for their whole lives and survive. You know, it used to be possible for you to come out of school and get a job in posta and do the job until you are 55 and retire. The teachers come out of the university and they get a job with the TSC, which is permanent and pensionable, and they do that job until they retire. What the future world is requiring is what we call multiple portfolio. What else do you know? What else can you do apart from go to class and dictate notes? Possess meta qualifications such as communication skills, conflict management, solution-oriented working, collaborative abilities, cross-cultural functionality, personal branding and flexibility over and above technical qualifications. These are key competencies that contribute to your multiple portfolio. It is not just enough for you to have technical qualifications. You need to have meta qualifications, qualifications above qualifications that are going to help you to be competent in a 21st century world. Systematically develop curricula that places emphasis on developing skills such as independent and critical thinking, problem solving, insight, and analysis capabilities. These skills must happen in school. They must happen in the classroom. If the teacher cannot transmit these skills, if the school has not created a modern learning environment where these skills can be practiced, students will come out of the school system without these skills. Number 2, integrate interdisciplinarity training into the curricula to allow students to develop multiple skills and knowledge in a range of disciplines. And I have given an example that if teachers cannot collaborate in designing research projects, then students are not going to pick these interdisciplinary skills that they need to survive in the modern world. Prioritize experiential learning that gives prominence to soft skills, such as the ability to collaborate, read social cues, and respond adaptively. The norm of dictating notes must be programmatically eliminated. Integrate learner-centered pedagogies to create independent learners who take responsibility for their own learning goals and achievements. Schools can no longer teach students for them to learn. They must teach students how to learn. Future-proof is a concept that is used in ICT. When you are developing systems and when you are developing applications, you develop applications that will take care of the future. That if the future changes, you will be able to plug in or to update your application so that with the change of technology, your applications do not become obsolete. That is what they call future-proof in ICT. We need to future-proof our students so that when knowledge changes, when the world changes, our students have the coping mechanism to change with it. But if we come here and we give them a static knowledge that does not allow them to change, they will not survive in the world beyond the school. The new education must teach the individual how to classify and reclassify information. How do you evaluate the veracity of information? How to change categories when necessary? How to move from the concrete to the abstract and back? How to look at problems from a new direction, and how to teach themselves. And this is where ICT comes in. ICT is an enabler. And for your students to be able to explore the world as it's going to be, you need to embrace ICT for education. It is a tool that you cannot ignore because it is a powerful tool in modern 21st century learning. I have said this, and I cannot emphasize it enough, and I will continue to emphasize it, that ICT is not a passing fad. You know, there are people who are talking about ICT as if it's something that has, some new novelty, something new that, you may want to integrate, or you may want, if you want to look trendy, you may want to integrate ICT. ICT will change everything we have known about education in the last half millennia. Everything. ICT will change the definition of a school, the definition of a teacher, definition of a student, definition of a classroom, definition of what it means to learn. ICT will change everything. And therefore, you not only need to embrace it, you need to future-proof yourself. Because sooner or later, the traditional teacher is going to be obsolete. They will be redefined by ICT. ICT, I cannot emphasize enough, is not a passing fad. When you come with your certificates, your degree certificates, what are you telling me? You're telling me that you know something. There is nothing you know that somebody else doesn't know. In the old days, when you only used to get books in school, then you could claim that there is something that you know that somebody else doesn't know. Today, if it's knowable, chances are everybody else knows it. So knowledge will not give you an edge. If knowledge will not give you an edge, what are you doing to your students if the only thing you are giving them is information? You are giving them something that is useless, that is not going to give them an edge, that is not going to help them. Because if it is information, if the information is knowable, chances are everybody else knows it, or everybody else can know it without a lot of effort. The traditional competencies offered by current schooling will qualify you for no job or for low-level skills job in the future. Learning is no longer a required competency. Learning how to learn has overtaken it. The idea that work equals security, that a good education guarantees a good job, and that the normal and predetermined path through working life is up a linear career ladder will increasingly fade away. A new picture is instead emerging. Work biographies are becoming more individualized. Breaks, discontinuities, and new starts are the norm. Short-term contracts, transition arrangements, and project-tied work are at increased risk, are becoming a reality even in normal employment relationships under increased pressure. To avert what we have termed future shock, the individual must become infinitely more adaptable and capable than ever before. We must search out totally new ways to anchor ourselves. For all the old roots, religion, nation, community, family, or profession are now shaking under the hurricane impact of the accelerative thrust. It is no longer resources that limit decisions. It is the decision that makes the resources.